Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Grow and Learn podcast. This is Zarina Dimitrova, your host. And I have the pleasure to welcome today Dr. Scott Behson. He's a very interesting and soon to be very famous person, author of a newly published book called The WholePerson Workplace. We're going to be talking about the holistic workplace today, how to deal with supporting employees to come back to work after the whole COVID situation, how to transition back to work. We're going to be talking about how to aid parents with parental leave and some childcare solutions. Actually, he has a lot of suggestions on how to deal with workplace challenges, not only born by the whole pandemic situation, but also pre-existing. So before I continue and give a too wide presentation, welcome Dr. Behson.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. You're calling from New York?
Yes, just north of New York City. Yep.
So tell us a bit about yourself first before we begin talking about your book and what you have to share. What brought you on this path?
Right. So I've been a business school professor for a long time. I teach at Fairleigh Dickinson University, which is in New Jersey, just west of New York City. And for a long time, I've done research and academic work in things like workplace flexibility and work-life balance challenges, both from employee and employer points of view. And about 10 years ago, I kind of had like a mid-career crisis. And it's one thing to do all this academic work and scholarship, and you work so hard on these articles that then 60 other professors read, right? And so I really wanted to have more of an impact. So I started thinking about who needs good information about how to handle work-life challenges. So it was working parents and their employers. And so over the last decade, I've really changed my career a bit. I still teach and do all my academic stuff, but I've been doing a lot of public facing work in terms of working with companies, doing workshops and talks to them, doing some public policy advocacy. I've talked to, actually I spoke at the White House and at the UN, and I've been working with the state of New Jersey's Department of Labor on a lot of these types of issues. And finally, I've written, now this is my third book. The first one back several years ago was called The Working Dad's Survival Guide. And it was advice and encouragement for fathers trying to balance work and family, because I saw that, there was a lot of information and advice for working mothers. And half of parents are dads, and I didn't see any help for us, right? So that was the first thing I wrote. And now this, then my work with employers kind of culminated in this year's, and actually just launched a couple of weeks ago, the WholePerson Workplace, building better workplaces through work-life wellness and employee support. And this book was really born out of, interviewing representatives of 50 companies, from the huge multinationals to literally a neighborhood convenience store with 12 employees and everything in between. And doing all my interviews during the COVID pandemic to see how these employers who care about their employees were really trying to not just survive from a business point of view, but how they were trying to help their employees through this really, really difficult time. So that's kind of my professional journey. I'm also, my most important role is I'm a husband and father.
Awesome. And what do you teach?
I teach things I teach things like human resource management and supervisory management. I kind of joke that I'm the people side of the business school. So I try to get all the MBA students to still have a soul and care about people, and not just the financial side.
I love the HR. When I also have an MBA from Asada Business School, and I remember that I really love the HR classes.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, then you have good professors.
Yeah. And by the way, you're coming to the right place, because through Grow and Learn, I also organized an online summit in March that was also human-centered for organizations. The New Game of Leadership, it was called. Okay. I had a lot of guests, more than 14 or 15 guests that talked about human-centeredness.
Great, let me know. future summits. I'd love to either attend or if I can help out.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you as a guest for the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the human, let me just quote the exact name, title of the whole person workplace. What is a whole person?
Well, yeah, so
Yeah.
this refers to how employers can value employees. So some employers just like they look at their employees as like a part of the machine that like just is there to work hard and we don't really invest much in it. Lots of employers, perhaps most of the employers of people listening today, value their employees as like valuable assets, which is good, right? In that, like, we take care of assets, but it's still transactional. It's like, I'll take care of you so that we're going to turn that investment on me. So, I'll work you 60 hours a week and cause all this stress in your life, and then I'll give you a wellness program, right? So that you can come back and work really hard. But I think the best employers and the employers that are highlighted in this book, they value employees as whole people. Not just as for what they can return to the employer and not just what they do between 9 and 5 or whatever work hours are, but they value employees as whole people with lives and challenges and stressors and responsibilities and priorities outside of work. And most employees have a desire to bring a lot of themselves, right, in their engagement and everything to work. So if employers value employees like that, they start thinking about how can I support employees with some of their life challenges so they feel better and are more well physically and mentally outside of work, for two reasons. One, because it's the right thing to do and we can really help people. And two, because when people feel good about their lives outside of work and they're not like overcome with stress and anxiety, they can bring more of themselves to work and it creates a better workplace culture. So that's kind of what the whole person workplace refers to. It's not really like for the individual to bring your whole self to work. It's really more the employer valuing employees as whole people. And if you can indulge me 1 second, this wasn't the original title of the book, but then I spoke when I was doing my interviews. Someone's quote really got me this term. So if I can read the quote, because it's so beautiful and I can't do it justice. So let me just read it for a second. We have to realize we get the whole person through the door. We get their backs and their hands and their minds and their hearts, and they're at all different stages in their lives. And we have to make sure we're doing our best we can for them. And I think that sums up the philosophy really well, that employees are whole people, right? And we're physical bodies. We have desires, our heart, and we have our minds and our engagement. And this also means that employees have all different types of concerns. You have working parents, you have younger employees who in the United States, for example, face a lot of student debt. You have, other employees like me, frankly, who are dealing with both raising children and dealing with parents who are having some health problems. You have, any number of employee concerns that if we value employees as whole people, then employers, managers, leaders, HR types can do a lot if they're creative about it in terms of helping people meet some of their challenges.
I understand. So in the summit that I was just mentioning, some of the speakers talked also about the fulfillment aspect of the employee. So their purpose aligning with the purpose of the company. Yeah. Basically, it runs back to as deep as culture. So it's not really just accommodating for the family needs and social needs of the employee, but also taking care of the acceptance in terms of aspirations.
Sure.
Do you talk about this aspect of the whole person in your book?
Yeah, I think that employment can be just a transaction, right? Yeah. Time and effort for money, or it can be like a mutually beneficial relationship, right? I think that's what really good leaders and holistic leaders really think about, right? If we build a good relationship here where I try to look out for you, you're more likely to look out for me, right? And we're more likely to support all of us, right? So it's not just we take care of somebody with parental leave when they have a baby. It's we take care of everybody when they have a particular type of need. And those could be challenges they face in life. They could be their aspirations. So it could be their desire for career development, for continuing education, for opportunities to volunteer, So to give back, to do charitable work, and organizations, and I highlight organizations that do a lot of those things.
And in your practice, have you actually encountered such companies or observed that there are practices that fall into the whole person concept?
Yeah. So no organization's like perfect about it, right? But I think any organization can, and many organizations do, embrace lots of elements of this. So, just to give a few examples, if you don't mind.
Sure,
so
absolutely.
Actually, from in Europe, Adidas was opening a new facility in a city in Germany. I forget what city.
Was it in Switzerland, maybe in Bern? I'm not quite sure, but
okay. Well, I think that that's the place in Germany they were building a facility.
Okay.
And when they were transferring some of their employees from other places throughout Europe to staff up, they purchased ahead slots at summer camps and sports camps for the children of those employees. One less thing for them to worry about when they were dealing with this transition and maybe losing their network about care and other people who can help for their families, right? So that's a pretty creative solution, right? You had other companies, a large company again, like Bristol Myers Squibb during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, had they gave people every third Friday completely off, and like no checking into emails or anything, just because it was overwhelming for so many people, and just helping them with burnout and mental health and well-being. And then it could be very small things. I talked to a food store that they had a married couple who worked for them that just had a baby. And most employers would say, well, we'll split your shifts so one person could be with the baby at all times, but then they would never be a family together. So the owners instead said, you know what? Keep working the same shifts together, just wear the baby. And that's what they did. And it was fine. And 7 years later, that baby is now this little girl who's in the store all the time and is like the mascot for the store and knows all the customers. The customers have loved watching this little girl grow up. And it's really been something that has built their culture and community. So it ranges from like very big picture things that cost money to small accommodations that just take creativity and empathy and listening in order to do. So, no company's perfect, but a lot of them, again, it starts with the culture and the values of my employees aren't just a part of the machine. My employees are people. And if they're people, then I can maybe support them through a positive relationship and trying to do right by them. And lots of companies and lots of employers do things that reflect this. And I give only positive examples in the book. I'm not, naive enough to think that, this is universally done, right? We've all had work experiences that have not been as life affirming, right? But there's no reason that hourly employees, part-time employees, employees at, in retail and in factories and in warehouses can't have really good workplaces to work in. So even though we kind of associate some of these practices with larger professionalized companies, there's really no excuse. And again, I talk to a lot of blue collar companies and companies that have largely hourly or part-time workforces. And there's things you could do to help people with knowing their schedules ahead of time, just so that they have more certainty in their lives and can plan ahead. Can have a big impact. One company just decided that we're not going to start any meetings until 10 o'clock, just because it's stressful for working parents to do drop off and get to work and things like that. So again, all it takes is some empathy and creativity to get started, and then how you embody whole person workplace practices depends on your situation, your workforce, your resources, etc.
Yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to ask you now. What are some of the challenges of on the employer side? So now, considering the current situation,
Well, I mean,
of getting people back to work and accommodating them.
Yeah, so I mean, right? I mean, managing in this like hybrid way that like we're anticipating that the world's going to move to is much more complicated for managers, right? It's easier to manage when everybody's there. And after that, it might feel even a little easier to manage when everybody's working remotely. But when you're kind of combining elements, right, that just gets more complicated. So I think some employers, managers are rightfully a little, I don't know, maybe they're not so confident that they'll be able to pull this off, and therefore there's some resistance there. A lot of, skeptical old school managers would, had resisted remote work and flexibility even when it was appropriate for many, many years. I think because.
Sorry, I lost your sound for a second.
No, just that, there were some organizations and managers, who just resisted remote work for so long. They were thrown into it, right?
Right.
About 18 months ago, so many organizations had to, right? And I think that many of these organizations and managers recognize that it's worked okay for the most part, right? We've kept things going. Yes, we miss seeing people, and yes, we might miss some elements of building culture, and yes, we might miss some opportunities for collaboration and for those like creative ideas to just bounce off each other. But by and large, most business organizations that have been able to work remotely have done so at least reasonably successfully. So I think that's the first argument to make, is that you were forced into this against what you wanted, and it worked out okay. So now, what if you embraced some of this and learned some of the lessons about what worked, what didn't work? How can we build on the things that worked? How can we fix the things that didn't work? That this can make a better workplace that, will run better. You'll have less like turnover and churn and conflict and stress in your life as a manager, if you can kind of build some of that. The other arguments to make against people or organizations or managers that might be skeptical is think about, the risk management part of it, or the continuity of service part of it. COVID is not going to be the last disruption in the workplace. Hopefully we never have anything as horrible as what has happened. But, organizations are going to have to be agile and resilient, and having some elements of flexibility, being able to listen to employee concerns and adjust to them, that helps build that resiliency and agility that will help you going forward. So that's the arguments I would make, but clearly it's not universal. I mean, there are organizations that, had a plan to return people to the workplace. And I think a lot of the plans, at least in the United States, were centered right around now, when school-age children were going back to school. They were kind of timing like, okay, the kids are going back to school, so that's one less thing the parents have to worry about. We could bring people back to the workplace. But now with the Delta variant, that's really very prevalent in the United States, and I'm sure in many other places where you all are listening, that's caused a lot of companies to rethink their plans or delay their plans. And I think that shows, right, that an employer values its employees as people by saying, your physical and psychological safety and well-being are primary, right? And we're going to adjust, and we're going to communicate the fact that, what, we don't have all the answers. We're trying to figure this out, but we're going to do our best to, take care of everybody as we go through this process.
I'm just wondering whether the companies that didn't have a very strong and people-centered culture were actually able to adjust to a big enough extent during this past 1.5 years.
Yeah, no,
and whether the fact that that people were working remotely actually changed the culture in some way, because it shouldn't have theoretically, but there's a saying, I think it's a Marxist saying, that let me think if I can quote it: the change in quantity impacts the quality, or something like that. So after such a long period of distance working, it could impact the culture. Or am I thinking alongside your thoughts?
No, I think it could. And, I think that's so, at least in the United States, I recently read this survey where about 80% of employees want to come back to the workplace, at least in some capacity. So most of them are looking for, ways that they can work in the office 3 days a week and at home 2 days a week, or something like that, so they can reduce their commuting, they can have a little better life balance. But also, a lot of people, you have your friends at work, you have social relationships at work. You get feelings of pride and identity through your work. And I'm speaking for myself. I really missed seeing my students in person. I really missed seeing a lot of my fellow professors. And yeah, it's harder to build kind of camaraderie, especially with new employees. If you had a strong culture before, you were probably able to sustain it. But if you didn't, I think you have some work to do now to rebuild your culture, and especially try to bring these values in place.
Based on my observation, you're absolutely right on both points, and I'm especially thinking of my female friends who have children, and they've been so grateful that they've been able to spend so much more time at home. They didn't have to commute and all of that, so they don't really want to go back to the previous work style.
So I think most employees, and again in the United States, what we're seeing now is that employers who have not been great employers are having a very hard time retaining their employees and finding new ones. And other companies that took care of their employees or are allowing some measure of flexibility going forward are doing fine in terms of retaining and keeping their employees. So, that's what the data say over here. And I presume, that there'd be similar dynamics going on. Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, I'm a college professor. My job was always very flexible, and I could do a lot of work from home anyway. And it allowed me to be a very present parent through my son's younger years. But I think a lot of I even have my students. I had them last semester. They had interviewed someone whose job really changed and went remote. Someone who had to work out in the world, in danger and everything through the pandemic. What made their work lives better, worse, etc., and what managers should be doing going forward. And it was very revealing for a lot of the students too, because it got them out of their bubbles and talking to people from different backgrounds. And that was a clear. So even just from my students collecting data for me, I suppose most employees felt that, I miss going to the workplace, but there's a lot of benefits to how we've decided to work. And I think that there's, it'd be a shame if we didn't learn any lessons from the last 18 months, right? And apply the fact that some things worked well and we can retain them, and other things maybe, we need to build back up.
How do you see the future of workplaces in the coming years?
Yeah, well,
what needs to change, or
it's I mean, who knows, right? I mean, early this summer, at least in the United States, it looked like we were going to be in the clear and we could go back to regular life and all this, and then things changed. So it's hard, but I think the best workplaces are going to be resilient and agile, and that means their workplaces are going to have to retain some level of flexibility in terms of where, when, and how work gets done. I think, from a physical design standpoint, I've been reading a lot about how, many companies might be reducing their office space and emphasizing group spaces or collective spaces or meeting rooms or informal meeting rooms, as opposed, so people who need to work in their office with the door closed, they can do that at home. And then you come in for the collaboration. So I'm hearing a lot about, kind of interior of, interior designers and architects who work with companies, that's kind of what they're seeing, doing that. And I think it's this all makes sense, right? And I think it's good that so many organizations are putting employee well-being, maybe not as their top priority, but as a significant priority as they make their plans going forward. And I think that's a really good change.
Do you see it all moving online, or do you see some coming back to physical activities like team buildings, offsite events for employees, or is this in the past already?
No, I really think that we are social creatures. There's something human, right, about being together. There's something different about eating meals together and working together. And so I think that there's always going to be an urge to bring people together, at least to some degree. So I really think that most organizations are going to settle on something that's kind of a hybrid approach where some work gets done remotely and other work is done, on site. I mean, some are going to embrace this, and some have. And we've all heard announcements from companies that are like, "We're remote forever now." And there's some benefits to that in terms of you could recruit, worldwide now. You're not geographically located. You could reduce some other costs and things like that. But that's not for everybody. It depends on the type of work you do and the type of culture you have and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that have to be done at a particular place at a particular time. Store shelves don't stock themselves, and warehouses, and drivers, and police, and all these other types of jobs. They don't have the luxury of going remote, right? So we're always going to have to build safe, resilient workplaces for large segments of our workforce.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Behson. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us on your book, The WholePerson Workplace?
Yeah.
Where can we find the book?
Yeah. So let me just do my little.
Sure.
The WholePerson Workplace. I know in the United States is in actual physical stores in addition to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and a website called IndieBound, which is a online bookseller that is a collective of independent bookstores. I believe in Europe, just about any European slice of Amazon will have it, and I'm not sure otherwise. But again, the WholePerson Workplace, I think, has lots of implications for, mostly for managers, leaders, human resources types, business owners, but there's a lot of implications here for individual employees and for job seekers. And I have specific advice and encouragement for those segments as well. So I think anybody can really learn something from here. Again, it's lots of examples of workplaces that embody some of these values that we've talked about over the last 20, 25 minutes. And again, so if you want to reach out to me or know where to find my work, you can go to scottbehson.com, SCOTT. My last name is spelled weird, BEHSON.com, and you can see my work and books and things like that. And of course, the WholePerson Workplace, building better workplaces through work-life wellness and employee support. You should be able to find it wherever you find books.
Awesome. So, did you just mention the names of the titles of the other two books? Because I'm not able to find them. I'd like to mention them as well.
It's fine. So the other book that's kind of relevant to work-life discussions is called The Working Dad's Survival Guide, and it's advice and encouragement for fathers trying to balance work and family. And the other book, I don't know, is as relevant to your audience. It's written for college students, and it's called We Hate Team Projects, a friendly, a practical, friendly guide for college student project teams. Because I don't know if you remember college, we all hated team projects because some people would slack off. And this is like a book to help teams in, higher education, in colleges, university, do better on their team projects and organize themselves better. So I don't know how central that is to your audience, but the WholePerson Workplace certainly is. And the Working Dad Survival Guide might be useful for a lot of your audience too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you, Dr. Behson.
Yes,
so your website again is Scott with the double T, Behson.com.
Yes, full name, SCOTT BEHSON.com.
Lovely having you.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to welcome you back again. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, great.